All right, so we're going to get started here. Welcome to all the newcomers and the returnees to our Growth Mindset Zoom, Coaches Zoom. And just to review, as I always do, that if you have a growth mindset, it means it's a belief that intelligence can be developed, your intelligence, that your mind is, or the brain is like a muscle that can be trained, okay? And it leads to a desire to improve by embracing challenges. That way you tend to achieve more. You are looking smarter with more energy, and you're learning. And some of the ways you can do this to develop a better growth mindset is a couple examples. Number one, acknowledge and embrace your imperfections. Number two, view challenges as opportunities, not obstacles. Third, try different learning tactics for yourself and your staff. Replace the word failing with the word learning, okay? And you're going to value the process over the end result of the growth mindset. Stop seeking approval all the time and just cultivate a sense of purpose in not only yourself, but your team culture, your staff. And that's basically a quick review of growth mindset. Now, so I want to just jump back to the month of May, because I know our last speaker, it was Cami, and it was mid-month. But last May was Asian American and Pacific Islander month. And the reason why May was designated as the AAPI month was in May 7th of 1943, the first Japanese immigrant arrived in the US, second generation. Then on May 10th in 1869, the quote, Golden Spike completed the first transcontinental railroad that was using Chinese labor. So in October of 78, President Jimmy Carter, with a joint resolution from Congress, declared the first 10 days of May as Asian American Pacific Islander Week. And then in 1990, George H.W. Bush extended it to last the whole month. So what I want to do today is quickly mention a couple of Asian coaches. First of all, one of the female coaches that I looked up to as I came through the coaching ranks was Aki Hyo. Aki was the head coach at Oregon State from 1978 to 1995. She was there for 17 years. She's in the Oregon State Hall of Fame. Now, the 2 previous years before Aki was hired there, the program only had 15 wins total. She won 15 games in her first season. And after that, she had 6 seasons of 20 plus years. When she first arrived in the US, she went to UCLA and basically observed Coach John Wooden's practices all year. That was Bill Walton's junior year. The Bruins won the national title that year. And when she got the job at Oregon State, part of it was a result of Coach Wooden and Pete Newell, 2 men's basketball legends who gave her high recommendations. Secondly, on the call, also usually on our Zoom, is JR Jolene Matsunami, who's the coach at American River Community College here in Sacramento. She's been there, 30 years and counting, never plans to retire, but JR has been the head coach at both Tulane, and American River. She's also been an assistant coach at the University of Washington, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, Northern Michigan, and Eastern Washington. And also, I want to say that, acknowledge some of the people that are also on the call. Tamara Inoue, the head coach at UC Irvine. In the past, we've also been joined by Kristen Iwanaga, assistant coach at Santa Clara. Makoto Higashiyama, that was a name for me, assistant men's coach at Harvard College. Asami Morita, assistant coach at Robert Morris College. And also one of our speakers was Megan Griffith, the head coach at Columbia. And Ellen Nakamura, also the head coach at Biola. Now, what I want to do is, because I do want to just mention, I just feel like I want to mention these. Shannon Lum is on the call, and Shannon hopefully is going to be our next speaker for Growth Mindset. We just have to confirm her, but Shannon just last month joined the Nebraska men's basketball staff as the recruiting coordinator. She left Cal Berkeley as a video coordinator, but at Nebraska, she is the first Asian American to work as a recruiting coordinator for a BCS school. She's only the second female in all of the Power Five programs to ever do this. So I know we're all excited about you, Shannon. She's gonna be doing advanced scouting. She's gonna manage the transfer portal, manage their recruiting database. And so I think you're gonna just be able to create your own landscape. You've got the canvas there. You're gonna be able to paint your own job. Second of all, I don't know if he's on yet, but Tony Nakashima, who was formerly the video coordinator at the University of Kentucky, and then this past year, assistant coach at Northern State in Aberdeen, South Dakota, just got named the head women's basketball coach at Walla Walla University in Washington. So congrats to him. Helen Tao, who's also on this call, has been hired as an assistant coach at Colgate University, where she went there from being the double at Princeton. Steve Yang, who I think is going to be joining us, is been hired as the assistant coach at McNeese State, and he was a double at Georgetown. And I do not know this gentleman, but he just got named assistant coach with the Seattle Storm, Perry Huang. And also on the call is a longtime coach, E.J. Oak Smith, who was a longtime legend and assistant coach at Louisiana Monroe, and currently wants to get back into the coaching ranks in college. So if any of you are looking for someone who's got a great teaching style, especially footwork, the footwork that you see Ariel Atkins perform for the Washington Mystics, those are EJ's footwork drills, okay? All right, so that's my little women's basketball history part here. And let me just quickly go into my snacks, okay? So I usually give 2 snack tips. Here's your first one. This is synergistically seasoned popcorn. And it's got a bright little package here. This is what it looks like. I'll probably be eating this later. But this is a very unusual mix. It's slightly sweet flavors of tangy, salty, smoky, and spicy. And for those of you who know me, I sweat sometimes eating ketchup. So when I first ate my first bowl full, I was just dripping. I had to go towel off with a paper towel. Now the sweet part of this, and I have a terrible sweet tooth, from Trader Joe's also, spring gummies. They're chewy and delicious. They come in shapes of a butterfly, a bird, a tulip, a bumblebee, and this is what these look like. I don't know if you could see them, but they will soon be jumping into my mouth, okay? Now for my, lastly, my music tips for today. So let me just get my music going here. The first one I'm gonna do is, it's soundtrack week. So I delved into my soundtrack collection. The first one I'm gonna show you is the soundtrack from Soul Food, an old movie, but some songs are great. So the first one I'm gonna play for you is called Don't Stop What You're Doing. You don't really want to stop what you're doing because it's just starting to get exciting coming out of the pandemic, hitting the road recruiting. And then this song is one of my all-time favorites, really old school, Earth, Wind, and Fire. I'm not going to ruin it by singing. Okay, my second soundtrack, because I think the re-release of the new version of Space Jam is coming up this summer. And these are some songs from the original soundtrack. This one here, the first one I'm going to play for you is called The Winner by Coolio. First things first, hit the recruiting. Next is called Hit 'em High. Okay, so that's my music selection, my 2 soundtracks, and hopefully you'll, some of you who want to hear the whole track, just call me, I'll play it for you. Ebony Halliburton, take a lesson on some of the songs that maybe you might want to think about for the next DJ Zoom Off. And I'll throw the ball back to Matthew.
Thank you, Colleen. As always, that was a major learning experience in a lot of ways. Not the least of which, I loved your Asian American Pacific Islander month. We have a lot of stars that happen to be Asian that come on this call. And I appreciate you highlighting some of their good work. And I'm really happy for the Helen Tao, Shannon Lum, Tony Nakashima, all really great people that are all moving on to new jobs. And I appreciate you highlighting that because they are stars, absolute stars. So speaking of stars, I'd like to introduce our guest of the hour. Candice Storey Lee, the athletic director at Vanderbilt, played 4 years for legendary Jim Foster and was team captain her senior year. They made the NCAA tournament 3 times, including a Sweet 16 in 1997. She holds 3 degrees, including a master's and a doctorate from Peabody College of Education and Human Development at Vanderbilt. And just to give you an idea of the trajectory of their athletic department, since 2007, Vanderbilt Athletics has won 5 national championships, won over 24 league titles and tournaments. Since 2008, Vanderbilt football has made 6 bowl games, breaking a 26-year drought. And my favorite, at last count, Vanderbilt had led the SEC 5 years in a row in student athlete graduation rate at over 90%. So I'd really like to welcome Candice Lee. Thank you for taking some time and joining us today. Thank you for taking the time, and just introduce yourself and say a couple of words.
Thank you, man. This is amazing. I haven't been on a Zoom where there were snack tips or music. That's the best. That's like the best part of my day today. That was amazing. Thank you so much for having me. And I hope this just ends up being like a conversation. I always learn. When I'm asked to speak, I usually do more listening and learning. So I would love for it to be conversational. But I've been at Vanderbilt for 25 years. As Matt said, was a student athlete there, and never thought that I would be there as long as I have, but ended up going to graduate school and started working as an intern in the department, and just very fortunate to have opportunities to move up. And, you know, I think a lot of times we move, right? We'll go someplace else to get new needs. I just feel blessed that I was able to stay at Vanderbilt and still, you know, have the opportunity to learn and to do some new things. I've been the athletic director for a little over a year, about a year and a week now. And such an interesting time, I think, as we all know, to be in college athletics with everything happening with COVID and social justice and name, image, and likeness and the transfer portal, and, you know, just supporting young people right now. It's a challenge. I can't even imagine what it's like to be a coach, but I love what we're trying to do at Vanderbilt. You know, we're high academic, we're private, but we're in the SEC and we're in a great city. So we think it's a unique value proposition. And at the end of the day, I feel very fortunate to get a chance to have an impact on young people. So happy to be here. Thank you.
So Candice, we all work in the basketball in one way or another, mostly coaches, but some video, some in other aspects. But I just wanted to kind of connect. I have something. It's just a few seconds, but I just want to share my screen and show, just to kind of connect us to you as a player here, just real quick.
Oh Lord.
That was good footwork. That was good footwork.
Deep in the archives for that. Now, I don't know where you got that. That is so funny.
That was good footwork. I couldn't find a lot, but I put a little.
There's not a lot.
You haven't changed a bit. You haven't changed a bit.
But what just touch a little bit on your playing days and your experience as a student athlete at Vanderbilt. Just talk about maybe the 1 or 2 things that really stood out in your mind as through your experience.
Yeah, you know, I played for 6 years because I had 2 medical red shirts, had just really bad knees, and you know, I learned very quickly to kind of figure out a different way to contribute. You know, I wasn't going to be a star. It was very clear to me, even without the injuries. I don't know that I was good enough to really be a high impact player on the court. But I did feel like, you know, I could have an impact certainly off the floor. And it was just, you know, I said earlier, I don't know if everybody heard, but like Robin Bostic was one of our assistant coaches. And I just remember as a student athlete being surrounded by some really great people, starting with Jim Foster and our entire staff, and just the sense of community. I mean, it's something I try to actually, like, I feel like it's a takeaway that I have as I tried to recreate like my senior staff. I thought a lot about just the way that I felt like we were successful because people understood their roles and everybody felt valued, and people have to contribute in their own unique ways. I felt like I could do that as a student athlete and try to, like I said, replicate that in our department. It was a wonderful experience. We were pretty successful, went to a couple Elite Eights. And I mean, it was just incredible, but it's not the wins. I think it's the people, it's the friendships, it's the relationships, it's the things that you get out of adversity. I think I call upon my student athlete experience all the time now in this role. And I imagine that, you all do the same in your roles. But yeah, it was incredible. It was incredible. I feel very blessed.
And just to go back to when Candice and I met, I think we bonded over sports injuries, and there was some talk of the knee problems. But what attracted you to athletic administration, and what was kind of the door that led into that? How did that all happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. I did not. I would say that when I got to college, I didn't really know. I knew you could be a coach. I didn't really know what administration was. But one of the first things that got my attention, so Carla Williams, who is now the athletics director at the University of Virginia, that I imagine many of you know, she was a great player, also coached for a period of time, and then got into administration. But when I was a student athlete at Vanderbilt, she was an assistant AD. And I think that was the first time, she's the first Black woman I saw in that kind of a role that wasn't a coach. And I think that just by watching her, you understand what's possible. At the end of my 6th year, did an internship. So David Williams was the athletic director at the time. Actually, he was not yet the athletic director. He was working at Vanderbilt, but he wasn't yet the athletic director. And he asked me if I wanted to do an internship. There were no commitments beyond just this year assignment, but got into that and then ended up kind of coming up through the internal side of athletics. So I did like academic support, compliance, sport administration, and really just had somebody who gave me a chance. But I really credit Carla with showing me what was possible, right? Even though I couldn't quite articulate it, but showing me that, administration, it's a way that you can. I didn't really think I had like the chops and the skills to be a coach, but I understood the value of athletics and wanted to give back to student athletes. And so administration just gave me a way to do that.
That's a very powerful story. And now you're doing the same thing for other young ladies that are coming up.
I hope so.
And I will say that you are one of the most impressive role models that I think our young ladies that and it's mostly women's coaches that are on here. There are some men's, but I do like to hold you up as a shining example of what people can be. And so I love to hear that story. Thank you for relaying that about Carla, and a trailblazer, both of you. And in your coming up, what was maybe the best piece of advice maybe someone's ever given you? If you can think of something, if not.
That's a good
put
question.
You on the spot too much.
Yeah, I don't know. You sent me the questions, but I purposely tried not to think too hard because I wanted to be just very in the moment. It's a good question. I think that this is some recent advice I've gotten, but when I became the athletic director, I was coming behind. It was really kind of interesting, strange circumstances. So I've been at Vanderbilt for a number of years and worked for David Williams, who for I think 18 years was our athletic director. He retired on January 31st, 2019. He died 1 week later, and his replacement had already been named, had been on the job for a week, Malcolm Turner. And Malcolm had come from the G League. He was the president of the G League, and he worked with us for about a year. And then, just one Thursday, he came in, he left. He never came back. He resigned to pursue some other opportunities. And so I suddenly kind of found myself as the interim athletic director in February of 2020. Under, like I said, some strange circumstances. Like the person who had mentored me was no longer there. I had a new boss who was there and I was getting to know, who then suddenly wasn't there. And then that was about a month before we go into COVID. And so I just remember thinking, oh man, like the first thing I thought about was like, okay, well, this is how David would do it, and this is how Malcolm did it, and I kind of forgot to think about how Candice would do it. And the advice that I got very early on was just to be yourself, you know, and it was like I walked into a situation where, you know, if you liked David, then you were excited about me because you thought I was going to be just like David because we were close. If you didn't like David, you weren't excited about me because you thought I was going to be just like David. If you liked Malcolm, you weren't excited about me because, you know, it just all of these things. And you know, just I wasn't used to the public scrutiny. I wasn't used to the comments. I wasn't, and I learned to, you know, you got to block all that out because if you're going to operate in your purpose, and you can't worry about noise. And I learned that noise is disguised a lot of different ways, but it's still noise. And that I've been operating with that advice, you know, I know it here recently, but it's really made a difference for me because you never know how you're going to get your opportunity. You never know, but when you get it, it's because you earned it. And there will be so many people that try to tell you otherwise, but it's just not true. So, you know, I'm learning and I'm still a work in progress to just do it my way and be confident in that.
That's right. One question I want to talk about
Yeah.
is leading through adversity and tragedy. You particularly in Nashville have dealt with a lot, and sports occupies this place in our culture that is important as kind of an escape, right? When as a player, as a fan, spectator, you know, we all kind of lean on sports for normalcy, and so when a tragedy happens and we have to suspend sports, that's like a very powerful decision, and it happens to fall on you. So can you talk a little bit about, you know, when the guys went through the Nashville bombing and there was the tornado that killed 24 people, and that's not even getting into COVID yet. But
Right.
you just talk about how you navigate those waters and how you make decisions in those tumultuous times.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think you're right that sports does offer an escape, but I think also things will happen in the world that will help us put things in perspective and focus on what's actually important. And certainly sports is important to all of us. You know, it's very important to me, but it's not the most important thing. You know, I remember waking up on Christmas Day when there had been that bombing downtown in Nashville. Our campus is only a couple miles from where it happened. And, you know, the very first thing you think is, are your student athletes okay? You know, are your kids who live off campus okay? Is your staff okay? You know, I feel like you know, part of what we have to do in athletics is, you know, we're serious about our craft, but we can't take ourselves too seriously because there are some more important things going on, you know, and we really can use sports as a vehicle, right, to have an impact and to have an influence, but it's not in and of itself just about sports. And I think we talk to our kids a lot about that, like with COVID. I'm like, COVID taught us that you cannot take things for granted. You know, if anybody would have told me we would not have March Madness, I mean, none of us, all of us would have thought somebody was lying. Like, oh, come on now. What could be so big that we wouldn't play basketball? You know, we wouldn't go to class. We wouldn't get on a plane. We wouldn't leave our homes. But I think that COVID was so devastating in so many ways, but it also forced us to slow down and think about what's important. And my biggest concern is like, I think we learned some valuable lessons. I'm certainly glad to be coming out of the other side of it. But there are some things that you know, I'm going to challenge our staff to hold on to because, you know, there's some humility that came with COVID that I don't know if we could have learned it any other way. And that's not a bad thing.
Now, I know in California, at UCLA, we kind of, we're a state school, so we follow the state guidelines. And California, we just kind of follow the guidelines. But being a private university and being in Tennessee, I imagine you had to kind of make some decisions for your university. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Like, I mean, during football season, we didn't have fans. We were the only school in the SEC not to have fans. We did allow a small number of students, and we ultimately did allow parents. But and that was not a popular decision. But with the medical expertise that we were relying on, and the fact that our facilities are right in the middle of campus, and we're in, like I said, 2 miles from downtown. I mean, the rates around us in Nashville were growing every day. And I just felt like at the end of the day, I told our kids that there's two things that have to happen if we're going to play. You have to want to play, and then the doctors have to say it's safe enough for you to do it. And even if one of those things changes, we're not going to play. And so at the end of the day, like if you all, so let's start with football. I'm like, you all want to play. It's my job to keep you as safe as possible. And if we have doctors saying, well, we're not sure it's worth, bringing in fans, doing this, doing that, I'm like, I'm not going to do it. And it was hard. It was a hard decision. We were the only school in our league that did not have fans, that had zero ticket revenue. But I'm like, at the end of the day, we're not doing this for money. And it was painful, right? I mean, my budget is still hurting, but I still think it was the right thing. Because, I had way more questions than I had answers. And I don't know how to look a parent in the face and say, I promise you your kid's going to be safe. Because I didn't know if that was true. And so, yeah, it was really, really hard. But at the end of the day, I stand by the decisions that we made, because, I'm a doctor, but not an MD. And I'm like, I'm not going to pretend that I know medical stuff, because I don't. And, when you're in charge of other people's children, you better be confident in the decisions that you're making and be able to defend them. And that's, it was hard, very hard, but I think it was the right thing.
Yeah, that's a lot of integrity there. That's very, very, a lot of gravity with those decisions you're making, and got to commend you. That's not an easy task. Now we'll get to something that's a little bit more fun to talk about. You just went through the hiring process, and I'm sure every coach here on this call has been waiting for us to talk about the hiring process and what goes into it. And how did you go about hitting the home run that you did with Shea Ralph? And talk about the first moment and move on from there. So what were the first things that you did? Did you hire a committee, or did you do it yourself? I don't have any intimate knowledge, so I'll let you lead us through that.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to talk about it. I think every search is different, because you also have to, there's local dynamics. There may be things particular about that program. So, there may be times that you use a search firm, maybe you do a search committee. I do think every situation has to stand on its own. I would say this, like I had to do a football search in December, and then I did this women's basketball search here recently. And in both cases, the very first thing I did, once I decided that I was going to make a change, then the day that I executed that decision, right, talked to the staff, I just very intentionally didn't do any search related stuff on that day. So on that day, so if we talk about women's basketball, when I told our head coach at that time that I was going in a different direction, it was important to me to really just treat that with integrity and not combine the two issues, right? So first was about telling the staff and providing them with the information that they need. Then I met with our team and just gave our team a sense of, here's what I think my timeline will be. Here's what I think I'm looking for. What's important to you all. And that was going to be their opportunity to provide input, but that was the only way the team was involved in the search. I didn't have any student athletes interview anybody. I think that's just a personal decision, but I didn't do that. And then I reached out to our recruits, to our signees, to let them know, here's the time frame you can expect. We're still committed to you. And then the next day started the search. And so by starting the search, I did use a search firm. For the women's basketball search, I used two firms. And I don't typically do that, but the reason why, so first of all, every time I use a search firm, I'm using them to help me with some due diligence, to help with some vetting, and I think, I don't know, I mean, I'm just speaking for myself, because people may do this differently, but it's really important to me that I have my own set of candidates. I certainly will rely on the search firm. They may know of people that I don't know, or people may pop up on the radar. but I don't really want them for the candidates. I want them to help me with some background, due diligence, and honestly, to set up the logistics. This is where we're going. This is what time you're going to call so and so. This is like just to help with that, because it's nice to just have more hands on deck. Then that very first day, I started calling candidates, and I already had my list. I did the search firm recommended a couple people that I was willing to talk to. And so I just started having phone conversations immediately. And, I don't, it just, in general, to me, it doesn't take long. Like, you know what you're looking for, right? Well, I mean, you should know what you're looking for. And so it doesn't take long to know, like, if somebody's kind of in that mix or not. And, in COVID, we also used Zoom, and, unfortunately, you can do, as time went on through COVID, you could also do some in-person stuff. I did do some in-person stuff during the football search, but there was a point in time I wasn't sure I'd be able to, just with everything that was going on. So that was a bit of a challenge, but and it took me right at a week with the women's basketball search. And I did not actually think it was going to go that fast, but I will give credit to the search firm, because they really just helped me line folks up and have those conversations early. And at the end of the day, I mean, when you're in an interview, I mean, everybody knows you can coach. Like, people are looking for the best fit, right? So I'm looking for like the person that I think has earned the opportunity to lead these young women, to represent our university, someone that I trust to, take the responsibility seriously. Clearly people who had done their homework. And I mean, I know people say fit, but it really is about fit. And sometimes, like, if you don't get a job, it's not because you didn't do something right. It just may be that school may have a few boxes that they have to check, that no matter what you did, you weren't going to check all those boxes. Maybe they need someone who's an alum. Maybe they're, yeah, yep, Colleen, were you about to say something?
I'm going to ask a question when you're finished with your side.
No, go ahead.
I want to ask you, when you were going through your candidates, could you maybe tell us 3 attributes or strengths that you really were trying to find in this person?
Yes, I was looking for someone who clearly was committed to the student athlete experience and student athlete development. That's a core value of ours as a department. So someone who demonstrated commitment to that. I was looking for someone who, could coach, like strong X's and O's. Had been affiliated with a reputable program, demonstrated success. And then I was looking for someone who I felt like could organize a program. So so I did talk to both sitting head coaches and assistant coaches, but someone who I could see as like the CEO of a program. You don't have to have been a head coach, but you certainly need to demonstrate that you have that capacity. And the one thing I forgot to mention, like when I said earlier, I used 2 search firms for the women's basketball search. So one of them was Parker, because I've used Parker for a number of things and they just know us. And so I knew it was going to be, I knew they already knew me and knew Vanderbilt. But I also used the services of a second firm, Renaissance, as some people may be familiar with. That's a Black-owned search firm that got started during COVID. And on the Black AD Alliance, which Alan Green from Auburn started, we were introduced to Renaissance's services. And at one point, like Kevin Warren, who's the Big Ten commissioner, was on a call, and he was talking about how he had started to use 2 search firms to ensure he had a diverse candidate pool. And he was like, it gave me an opportunity to also give some business to these smaller minority-owned firms, and give them a chance to get into this business, right? And just, have something they could put on their resume or in their portfolio. And that really spoke to me, because it's important to me to try to support. And I also wanted a diverse pool. I wanted to ensure I had a diverse pool. So we used Renaissance to help us with some of the vetting and the due diligence. And it was, I think it was helpful to them, but they also did a very good job. And it now gives me a chance, like now I feel familiar with them, and I will likely use them for my next search. But I thought that was important too, because I keep talking to my staff about, making sure that we're demonstrating a commitment to diversity and inclusion in everything we're doing. And that it's got to be in everything. And so I did just want to mention that because I thought Kevin Warren had really good advice on that.
Thank you.
And Candice, when you talk about your list of people, is that just a kind of a short list that you keep in your head or written down somewhere just as you go, just in the future, I may need someone, I'm going to check with this 5 people first or whatever. Is that kind of how that goes?
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Like and I tell our administrators too that like if you're a sport administrator, like you should know who the coaches are in the sport that you work with. You should know. We always have to be prepared because you never know when a coach may leave voluntarily or involuntarily, and you do need to have an idea. So yeah, I had a list. But I also talked to some people that I trusted, who I knew were very close to the game and would know. And you keep that circle very small, because you're trying to protect like the integrity of the process. And I didn't want names to get out there and that kind of thing. And it's amazing to me how they seem to always get out. I have no idea how that works, but like I feel like, especially just women's basketball, I feel like I'm always paying attention to who's out there, or talking to people about who's out there. So yeah, it was like a list that I had, but then I kind of built upon it using some other resources.
And can you talk a little bit about what Shay Ralph, your hire, what she did to set herself apart, maybe from the other candidates, or maybe 1 or 2 things that you really liked that she brought?
Yeah, I would say so. My very first conversation that next day, the first person I called was Shay, and really enjoyed the conversation. I loved her questions. I thought she had a great perspective. Um, I actually got off that first call and I was like, oh man, I mean, surely it can't be that easy. And I made myself go through the process because I just felt like we connected. And I don't really know any other way to say it. I felt like she understood what my vision was for the place. I felt like she um, was this nice combination of humility and confidence that I was looking for. Someone who's coachable but had a point of view and was convicted. Um, you know, she brought some sort of basketball street cred that we desperately needed. So part of it too is like what you need at the time. What I feel like we needed 5 years ago may be different from what we need today. So, when you're looking at jobs, like just being really trying to do your homework to kind of know what those dynamics are, I just think is really important because no 2 jobs are the same. Even a job at the same school is not the same a few years later, or given what the leadership looks like, what the status of the department is. And just for what I needed, I felt like she was perfect. She was perfect for it. And I think she, very much committed to the holistic student athlete experience and wants to win. I think we'll do it with integrity. Um, she talked to me about one of the things that stuck out to me. She talked about being at UConn and losing kids to Stanford. And she's like, I'm losing kids to Stanford because they're looking for a certain academic experience. And, no disrespect to UConn, but the academic experience at Stanford was more of what they were looking for. We could give them the basketball part, but not the academic part. And I thought, well, at Vanderbilt, we should be able to give them both. And that really spoke to me. But the biggest thing is like, she could see Vanderbilt for what it can be, what it is now and what it can be. And like I've said, I said at the beginning of our football search, I'm not going to beg anybody to come here. I don't think I have to do that. And that's not because, oh, we're just so great. I just think that if this is the right fit for you, I don't have to beg you to come. You'll see it. If I have to convince you, then this just isn't the job for you. But I think that's the right thing because I don't want anybody here that doesn't see it for what it can be. And that's no hard feelings if it's not the place for you. That's okay. But to me, she made it clear from the very beginning that this was a place where she could be successful. So,
yeah, I know we're anxious to get to Q&A. I just want to ask one final question.
sure.
Is the process different from sport to sport? I imagine, football would be different than basketball. And how different is it?
I mean, I would say there may be some elements that are different, but in general, you're still looking for fit, right? And you're looking for the person that you think, again, sort of deserves the opportunity to lead the program. I think, with when I did the football search, I engaged with alumni in a much greater way, because the so they didn't get to interview anybody, they didn't pick the person, nothing like that. But I engaged them and just sort of communicated with them in ways that you might not have to do if you're searching for a tennis coach. Or I would say that with the football search, our chancellor wanted to kind of lock arms with me. With basketball, he was absolutely supportive, but he was like, I think basketball, you got that. I think football, just the high profile nature, it was important for him to show support, in a greater way. So just, depends on the sport, things like that. But I would say by and large, the process itself is the same.
Now, would you hire a search firm for other sports?
Yeah, I mean, I like the search firm. I mean, we hired a golf coach and I hired a search firm because I just wanted them to do the due diligence.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Great. Well, guys, coaches, I know everyone's been anxious to, Ebony's got her hand up, I think, but I'd like to open it up for Q&A for these final, 12 minutes. Coaches, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask Candice a question if you like. Ebony, do you have one?
Is she driving?
Ebony's driving.
Oh, shit.
And I want her to be safe. Yeah.
Hey, I have a quick one. How many candidates did you bring to campus then for your women's basketball position, or did you?
No, I would say I guess if you want to say finalists, we have 4 finalists. They did not all come to campus.
Okay.
But 4 finalists. Mm-hmm.
And then, one thing I'd like to kind of know, just, and I'm speaking from a point of zero knowledge of this hiring industry. So when you hire a head coach, do they come in with, this is the staff that I'm probably going to bring, or do they run that by you, or do you sit with them and interview assistants to bring in? How does all that work?
Yeah, for me, I don't interview any assistants. I just say to the coach, like, here's the pool. And I mean, in the interview process, I'll ask, like, what are you thinking about?
Yeah.
And maybe in some sports that matters even more. Like in football, it was like, who's going to be your offensive coordinator? Who's going to be your defensive coordinator? It's a little different. But in women's basketball, I did ask, like, what are you thinking about for staffing? And in some cases, they know exactly who they want. I had one candidate who had like a spreadsheet, a very, very intricate spreadsheet, depending on the kind of job that they got. They have been very thoughtful. So if I'm on the West Coast, then this is who I think I need. If I come to Vanderbilt, this is who I think I need. If I come, really intricate. And so for me, I don't interview assistants. I love to meet assistants. I always talk to people before they come, because to welcome them, and I want them to kind of know the culture that they're walking into, but I don't interview anybody. If they pass the background check and you want them, then fine, because you got to deal with them. Yeah.
Thank you. Makes sense.
Ebony, you do have a question after all.
Yes, ma'am. Hey, this is probably my favorite Zoom, and we had some really good. We had great speakers on this Zoom. It's probably my second favorite. Mine was the best. But no,
well, you should pick yourself.
I'm just kidding. But you said something that really stood out to me that was awesome, and you talked about the minority firm you hired just to give them an opportunity. What I think that's amazing. Because you are in position to make those decisions. My question is, for coaches who are on the phone, and like me, I'm an assistant at Kansas State, and I know a lot of different people are different places, especially the minorities. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give us in the position that we are in, mm-hmm. as far as preparation? Mm-hmm. So when we get to a place where we can impact and influence here, but as an AD, it's another level as well. what advice would you give for a process of sharpening us and a preparation?
Yeah, it's a great question, Ebony. And, and I certainly, so listen, I mean, I look at everything as a Black woman, because I'm a Black woman, but I don't want anybody to take, like, certainly don't be offended by what I'm about to say. But I do think that sometimes, right? So, in particular, as a minority coach or administrator, we get pigeonholed, right, into being like, I remember like being on staff and like folks wanting you to talk to like the Black recruits and their parents, or the like. Sometimes you just get pigeonholed as being the one. I would say that it's important, I think, for us to sort of challenge those perceptions. And so if I was an assistant coach, I think I would want to make sure that I tried to understand every part of the way the program runs, and knew who the donors were, and tag team with your head coach when they go speak at something. And I know, just from my I've never coached, I hadn't coached nothing a day in my life. Okay. So I'm just sort of speaking from, but it seems to me that I know every head coach is not comfortable with that. Like sometimes the people above us are not always comfortable with um, giving us access. We have to figure out. So whether that's like mentors or other people who are championing for you, other people in your department. So you're at Kansas State, Ebony. I don't know if there are other administrators that you could talk to, but like, I just think that whoever you've connected with, make sure you understand like how the budget works. How does fundraising work? How does, like, understand all parts of a program? Because when you become a head coach, like, I mean, if you gonna get to coach, okay, y'all love basketball, you're gonna get to coach, but it's about being like a CEO. It's a whole different thing. And I just think that when you are a person of color, sometimes people try to put us in boxes and count us out or pigeonhole us. And it is up to us to try to be as well-rounded as possible. Because I just think we are still fighting against some really, really significant stereotypes. That's not fair, but I've been AD for a year, but people are like, oh God, can she fundraise? Has she ever fundraised? Can she do this? Can she do that? And I'm thinking, I've been in the department for 20 years. I've done this, I've done that, I've done this. But it's almost like they held it against me. Some people held it against me because they're like, well, we haven't seen you do A, B, and C. And I'm like, well, I wasn't the athletic director. Like, so, you're supposed to know your role and your place. And so, I just think that sometimes like there'll be these like arbitrary rules that they will use that will then limit you. And we just have to figure out how not to limit ourselves. It's not easy. If you are not sort of status quo, it is not easy, but that doesn't mean we cannot do it. I just think you're going to have to be really intentional and creative about how you make the connections, who you stay in communication with, who can be a champion on your behalf when you're not in the room. That's how we get opportunities, right? Who's willing to speak about you and for you when you're not there? What kind of genuine connections are you making? Like, I think about some of the assistant coaches that have come through Vanderbilt who have gone on, like there are some that they have been really intentional about spending time with me when they were here and getting to know me. And I'm telling you, I'll call anybody for them right now. And then there are some who never said a word. And then like, you're going to get calls. Like if you worked at Vanderbilt, somebody's going to call me about you. They just are, because that's the world that we're in. And the worst thing is if I'm like, yeah, I didn't know her. I didn't know her. Or I didn't, whatever. I just think that we got to remember that we're very, very well connected. Whatever institution you're at, there are a lot of people that are watching you. So use those resources. I'm saying be opportunistic, be genuine, but build some real connections, because you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised what senior administrator is going to be the AD at such and such next. What dean's going to be the provost or the president over there at such and such. What, you just never know.
Great question, Ebony. We've got a couple more. Yep, Fred, go ahead.
First of all, Candice, thank you for coming on our famous program here, but also for those that don't know her background, was a very good basketball player who turned us down where I was at the University of Texas, broke our hearts, but that's okay. Your knowledge and your experience as a basketball player, how did it help you in this position now, taking the steps? And then the other part of it is when I'm down in Nashville, I would love to take you out to lunch because I'm down there because we have family there and they're big boosters of your university.
Yeah, that are CSU. Where's CSU? Where are you at?
I was at CSU, but now I've just taken another position. I was head coach at CSU for 8 years. So I've been at Texas, North Carolina men and women, University of Houston, but we recruited you. You turned me down. But I'll make sure I shoot you an email. And I'll never forget that, Carlene. So just want to I'll rub that in some more. But I'm down there a lot. Randy Will was at the head coach or assistant head coach at Carolina. His son played for you guys, and he's in minor leagues right now. So that's why I'm down there a lot with him.
Yeah, well, I would love for us to get together. So that's great. Yeah, I will leave my contact information before we get off. So I would love that. So your question was, how did being a basketball player like help me in this position?
Yes, how did because you probably use some of that toughness and hey, I'm not going to be defeated, and that's the mentality I still use now. I've been coaching for 33 years, and it's like, hey, you go back to being thinking as an athlete sometimes positions, and I think administration you're totally different, but also you may go back and use some of that. Hey, I've been through this, I can get through it. How did that help you to get to that position and being I think the first Black athletic director in the Southeast Conference too?
The first Black woman, yeah.
Yes.
I think you're absolutely right. Like when I talked about my experience, I was a role player at best. I was probably hurt more often than not. I had to learn how to sort of overcome quite a few things and be resilient, but still encourage myself, right? Not figure out how you add value, even if it's not in the way that you may have thought, right? But I think even now, like I sort of remind myself that I've overcome adversity, and I may not check all the boxes that other people want to check, but that's okay, right? I can still have an impact. I can still, so I do. I mean, I truly think that being a student athlete changed my life. It was transformational because it was really hard and it was really humbling and it was really rewarding. It was like all of those things wrapped in one. And so Coach, I do think I probably use it more than I even realize it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. Give me a lot to think about.
Got a question from Diane Nolan. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Diane.
I Candice, this has been great. And I just want to go back to when you made the decision not to have fans at the football, which I'm sure had to be, as you mentioned, a hard decision. How did you manage up to get your chancellor and to agree with you? Because I'm sure you had to figure out in your heart that was the best decision,
right,
not a favorable one. And right, how did you negotiate the powers up?
Yeah, it's a great question. I feel very, very fortunate because the chancellor that I work for, I mean, he's incredible, but he very much is like, I'm your partner. And so if you can articulate to me why, I'm gonna support you. That's kind of how we sort of start on everything. And for me, that is beautiful. I feel like I have tremendous support. And at the end of the day, so I'll say this, I took my lead from him because he said, listen, like we brought all of our kids back to campus. We had in-person classes. We had some very, very rigid protocols, but he said, this is the livelihood. This is the lifeblood of our campus. And so getting researchers back in their labs and kids back in the classroom and kids back on the field, that's what we're committed to. So in my mind, I'm like, well, I've got to figure out how to get kids back on the field and do it in the least disruptive way possible. The only way I really know how to do that. So when I ask the doctors, well, what do you suggest? Well, can't tell you what to do, but we think you're going to be increasing your risk if you have more people. We learned from the SEC that a lot of schools kids were putting themselves at risk by hanging out with their family afterwards. It was all the stuff that was happening away from the field. Like the field itself, people weren't really, COVID didn't seem to be getting transmitted that way. It was all the stuff around it. And I'm like, you know, at the end of the day, this is so hard for everybody. And the least of my concern is the fans. And I knew what with our fans, I had to over communicate to them. When we did finally start letting people in, like in baseball, we didn't charge anybody. Like a fan hadn't had to spend a dime with us. All right. We gave everybody subscriptions to ESPN3, and we did all this stuff because I felt like from an integrity standpoint, I have to choose these kids over revenue. And not really popular, right? And I got a big hole in our, the bank account. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to stop saying at the end of the day. But my goal was to just protect our kids.
All right, it's a commendable act, and I just wanted to figure out how you got it through.
Parents were really upset. Ultimately, we did let parents in, but not for the first couple weeks. And so, we started off with our first couple games, we just let 1,000 students in. And my rationale for that was that we were testing kids twice a week. So they were in a testing protocol. We weren't testing parents. We weren't testing all these outside people. And my concern, it took everything we had to get through football season. We had the most opt-outs in the country. We had 26 kids opt out. I mean, that's a lot for a roster that's already pretty limited. And then you have injuries and so I was just focused on trying to give these kids the best opportunity possible to compete. And when the doctor started hemming and hawing, I'm like, oh, well, that's not good enough for me. Mm-hmm. Like I need you all to be confident. And then I will make a decision based on that. But they weren't. And so to me, that was pretty telling. It was very conservative. In hindsight, would I do it again? Probably. Because at that point in the year, just didn't know very much. For basketball, we did allow family. And of course, the visitors had tickets. We did not open up to outside fans until baseball season.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's go with a last call for Q&A questions for Candice. We're just a couple minutes past 6 and want to respect her time and let her go right away. So if there's anyone else.
I do.
Yeah, Colleen.
This is a basketball question about your court. Candice, is your basketball floor, are the benches still at the end lines or?
They are.
Oh my gosh, wow. I had a pro-am team loving basketball that we actually went to Vanderbilt to play an exhibition game. That was the strangest thing, where the benches are in the baseline. And so when your team switches baskets or at the other end of the court, you're screaming at that end. So I thought someone had told me that you reconfigured it, but it's a great home court advantage, of course.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, they're still on the ends.
How'd you like to have your team benches on the baseline, So when they sub, they run to mid-court, right to the table.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Well, Candice, there are very few people that are as impressive in person, but you are one of them. You are one of my favorite people in the world, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be with us today. And you shared so much amazing knowledge and expertise and insight. On behalf of everyone, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate y'all asking me to join. I put my email address and my cell phone number in the chat. And if I can help you, then just reach out to me. I'm still learning how to manage my inbox. So if it takes me a little while to get back to you, it is literally just because I haven't gotten to it yet. I haven't figured it out, but I'm going to. So text me, call me, email me. If I can help, I'd be glad to.
Thank you so much.
Candice.